Welcome to The Future is Now, a futuristic Zoom communique from the future. I am Cedar.
And I'm Sequoia. And we are historians from the future, from the year that you would call 2688, in the place that you would call Humboldt County, California. But we just call it here and now.
But we call it here and now. Yes, exactly. So today we're discussing, we've gone through history and we have found some interesting artifacts, and particularly this one thing that was called a website, which predicted a lot of the ways in which your future is going to come into become this glorious utopia that you see behind Sequoia and myself. So today we've gone through time, and we have help from our intrepid assistant Rufus, who's attempting to connect us to these visionaries from your time, the year 2020, which is ancient history to us, in order to learn more about who are the folks who are doing the great things in the year that you call 2020 that came to fruition in our time, in your future. And so on this web page, as they call them, we found a listing that was called on the land office.
Should we have Rufus show this?
Oh, can Rufus go ahead and show us, Rufus? Show everybody.
Rufus hangs out at the library a lot on the computers and is very, very smart.
We don't have computers now, but Rufus is connecting us to what you all do with computers.
Which is amazing and fascinating. Let's see.
And today we have someone who does theater work, someone named Zuzka. And this listing on the land office deals with theater and with the issue of your time, climate change, as they say. The climate was changing. So welcome, Zuzka. And there's the listing from the land office, and it describes a very interesting theatrical community that will come together around in this former timber harvesting area where they would take trees and turn them into all these wonderful wooden things. But it was right on the edge of what you called Humboldt Bay. So there it is. Anyway, thank you, Rufus, for showing us that. People can, of course, go to I think they call it the web page of Cooperation Humboldt, one of these groups that was putting these listings up, and read for yourself. But we'd like to welcome to the future, or thank for having us in the past, or your present, whatever it is. Zuzka, hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be connected to the future in this manner. You know, this is going to be really exciting. So thanks for having me on the show, Cedar and Sequoia.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for being willing to do this experiment. And it seems to me from the research that we've done, it seems like, especially in this particular time of the year 2020, when there was the global pandemic going on, that a lot of people communicated this way. But it is very new to us and a little bit scary. So thank you for, being so welcoming.
Yeah,
we are 668 years in your future, and communication is quite different than now than it was then. We have much more of an ability to connect on a different wavelengths than hard to explain. But
it's
that's
true.
Not what we're here to talk about.
We also have a person that will come by our houses and pick up notes that we've written for other people and deliver them to them. So that is a way that we communicate as well.
Oh, you mean like a postal service?
We
still have that.
You have that.
So that survived into the future. This is just wonderful, because currently I have been receiving these what's called electronic emails. From a representative in our government, and she's very worried about the United States Postal Service actually being dismantled. So this is great news. I'm so glad that I don't have to sign any more of her petitions for that.
Yeah. And we, we can't say too much, because I don't want to mess up the time-space continuum. So you don't need to tell her that, because probably the work that she's doing is important for its surviving into the future. Yeah.
I don't want to ruin that. Yeah.
Don't ruin it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we like to understand about how people do communicate ideas in your time period. We have great festivals, and we do perform theater and artwork in our time period. But being 668 years ago, it is a little different for us. So what is the work that you're doing to bring people together to experience artwork and to work through some of the issues going on in your day? What kinds of theater do you do? What kinds of art?
Well, thank you for the question, Cedar. So I think I'm going to have to talk a little bit about the kind of work that I do when there isn't a pandemic happening. As you both have mentioned, in this time right now in 2020, there's this odd situation that has actually made it very difficult to do the very fundamental thing that theater does in my time, which is bring people together physically in the same space to communicate stories and ideas and images and dreams and conflicts in a way that everybody can share and feel at the same time together. And so that's right now very difficult because we can't actually physically come together. But otherwise, the things that I have been working on currently in the last year, I have been working as, my position is called an associate artistic director. So I'm planning and bringing together a group of people around an artistic vision to write a new play in collaboration with our local coastal tribe, the Wiyot tribe, who in this day and age, I don't know what it looks like in 668, but there is still a lot of separation between communities in this day and age, and a lot of stories and history of our indigenous people here that is little known. So part of this project is that the people that have come together in this group of creators, a lot of different people, Wiyot community members and elders, artists who work at the theater company that I work at, which is called Del Arte International, which is mentioned in that website that both of you referred to, that you screen shared, and then independent collaborators, indigenous collaborators. And the reason why we have so many different types of people is so that as we bring this story together, we're not making assumptions based on my individual and history, but that there are multiple voices informing the script we are writing, which is about the life and work of a contemporary artist who descends from the Wiyot tribe, named Rick Bartow. So the whole thing's called the Bartow Project, and we're working on a piece to create, we're working on a play that will include a lot of amazing visual elements. So large puppets and masks and shadow play and set pieces that become other things. So that's been one of the things I've been working on this last year.
Well, you'll be glad to know we're do a lot of work with shadow play and puppets in your future also. That
great.
carries forward for sure.
Oh, great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do come together a lot to do theater and to act out our past and our futures, to understand the past and to point towards a future, which I think is very important. And I wonder how much different that is in your time. You know, you're speaking about not being able to get together in a group of people, and certainly it is available to you. I've heard tell that there are very, very many plays that are on screens, that you could go on the internet, you could watch a lot of things that are plays, but that I would imagine that there's something lost when you're not in a room together, feeling your neighbor's emotions, and feeling the emotions of the people who are on the stage. And I don't know, I find that the shadow puppets and the shadow play are it's so real and vivid. And is that the same on the screen?
But maybe she's confused because I think maybe she called it internets, and I think they refer them as interwebs.
Okay. That you get caught up in. I try not to spend too much time as we're doing our research, and Rufus will bring to us many of these web pages. And I, for one, find it very easy to get trapped in them, like a spider. I'm like someone's prey trapped in the interwebs. So it's
very sticky. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. You don't even know you're entering them, and then you blunder in, and all of a sudden you can't find your way out. Yeah.
Gosh, we don't have that problem. So glad.
Yeah, I mean, when one of the differences I think between streaming and live theater is, in live theater you're required to point out an exit so a person can leave at any time. They're free to leave at any time, especially if they're not enjoying the play. So I think just to answer your question, there are a lot of fundamental differences, and maybe this is different, and maybe that has changed in the future. But for us now, there are fundamental differences between what we call live performance, to differentiate between performances which happen via a screen or are mediated through technology. And it's actually an interesting experiment that's happening right now, because many companies that normally engage in live performance are trying to translate what they do to the screen. And I always think of it as like, well, it's really lost in translation, because for me, the thing about being alive in a room with other people is that, what they say, 80% of what we communicate is body language, so it's actually unspoken. And some part of that body language is also something that we don't necessarily receive. The information we receive isn't necessarily even visual. There's temperature, there's movements, there is tension, energetic tensions that people hold in their bodies and that communicate their feelings and their attitudes. Even if they don't want to communicate those attitudes, it's difficult for to actually mask those feelings. And so for being a person who does perform also in live performances, one thing that to me is irreplaceable and the most fascinating thing about being alive in front of a group of people which are alive and we're in the same space is receiving that information from them, and then also delivering sort of information. And what happens is we kind of all agree to step into an alternate reality where we are no longer in our normal lives. I am no longer the person that I am in my normal life. I become a new person for the sake of the play, which is what we call some of these live performances. And the audience believes that, and then allows themselves to also shift realities. So it's a kind of I'll just say like a Stone Age virtual reality. It's like we can create virtual realities without the mediation of technology via live theater. I think that that's thrilling. Some of the students that I've worked with, because I also teach techniques of this kind of thing, have talked about how the exercises that we do in order to collaborate more effectively together are better than drugs. And I think that that is true as well. And the last thing I'll say about that is that one of the more popular things that people talk about when talking about live theater is some study. It's very popular nowadays in 2020 to statistically prove that things happen, because they don't just believe, they don't want to take people's word for it. They need like statistics. So some scientists found out that when people are in a theater seated together, that everybody's hearts begin to beat at the same rate. So then there's a kind of vibration that everybody begins to share that I think feels very good to people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's very interesting. One of the things that stood out a bit to me about what you were saying was that the different ways that you're being challenged to translate your theater into this screen-based work, which of course for us is very odd. We don't have this. It's signature of your time period, this connection to the screens, and it's very odd for us. And for us, that's a very, now you didn't even mention it, but the smells, the greatest actors of our day put off quite an odor, and that is part of their technique, is in order to draw the audience in and make a connection with them, and the whole crowd just, it's a thing.
Become,
yeah, it's hard to explain. I mean, you don't do that in
performer.
your time period, so I guess, but
well, I wonder
see.
if that is a reflection of this thing that your scientists have discovered, when the hearts start beating in unison, what other sort of chemical sense or transmissions are given out. And that is something I also thought of too, Cedar, is a thing that I appreciate very much about our theater, is the smell. It's very interesting. And that way that, as we're coming together to do, and it's very aptly called a play, we are playing when we come together. And that it was really what I think, as we were doing our research and found this website with the land office, and then we're reading about this particular theater, that is the thing that struck me, was how aptly the person who wrote this predicted what the future would be, where we come together to play and understand each other, and to enjoy one another, even while tough things are happening, that we have this play where we can understand each other. And I guess because we don't have the focus on statistical proof, I had no idea that we were all, when we're doing this, moving in unison inside of our bodies.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
It's just normal.
Now, I'm very normal for you. Okay, yeah. I'm very impressed with this technique you speak about, actors having developed, where their essence, or their the odor or smell, that they are able to bring the audience in with that. I know some actors who give off a very strong smell when they are performing, but not all of them have that. I'd say I'm probably somewhere in the mid-range,
It's a skill to be acquired.
Yeah, and it's something that I now can, have an intention about, which is, that's another thing in our times, is intentions are considered important in the things that we do, that they help to fulfill our desires.
That, and again, I won't say too much about the future to, don't want to mess with the space-time continuum, but that is something that we definitely owe to you, because we do a lot of that as well. Setting up intentions.
Okay. Yeah. I have to go back to something that you were mentioning earlier. This, and you said in the phrase, this connection to screens we have in our time, which is a very interesting thing. I mean, I'm sure as historians, you're aware of the fact that in 2020, this is a very recent development in the last decade or 15 years, which is, right, a smidgen of time. And yet, it has now become prevalent around the world for people to be more engaged with their screen device than with other people. And that's a huge shift, I think, in civilization in general at this time. And I think one of the things also that the theaters in 2020 um, sort of have large debates around, because especially right now during the pandemic, it's like, oh, great, if we didn't have these screens, then we wouldn't be able to share information at all at this time. And yet the very purpose of theater is to bring people together in real time and space, and mm, I'll say this in a sort of extreme way, but to break the addiction to the screen, which keeps people from working on how we develop again relationships between each other in real time and space.
Can you tell us about that, how people build those connections and the work that you do and the beautiful things that happen when you're doing this work of, in order to address issues that are challenges? Even though we call this a glorious utopia that we live in the future, we still have problems. You have misunderstanding, but things are generally much better than you're experiencing. But we have to work through stuff, and we use art to do that here as well. And so I'd be curious to hear about some of the work and how you're able to address, as this one listing with on the land office pamphlet that we found talks about dealing with the sea level rise that was happening or was about to happen. I can't, my time's fuzzy here a little bit, but
we're getting pretty close to it. We're not there yet, but they tell us that within 20 years it's going to start affecting things.
Yeah. So how, even, this, the story is of this theater is addressing it, or embracing it, or not running away from it, but actually building your place of theater on the rising sea waters as it comes. So I thought it was an interesting metaphor for how theater addresses problems rather than runs away from them. And so what are some of the issues that are challenging? You speak about the relations between the different types of people in your area at the time. But what are some other things that you dealt, or some magical moments that you've experienced in doing this work?
Well, the first thing that really springs to mind is working. So one of the other projects that I've been engaged in the last 4 years was teaching theater to incarcerated peoples just north of this area here. So in our time, people are put into cages when they break laws. I know it's really barbaric, but this is just the world we live in right now.
We don't judge. We're historians. We're not here to pass judgment.
Yeah, you understand. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have that in our time period, but we understand, at least, conceptually.
Yeah. It's actually kind of difficult to wrap your mind around until you're in it, in a sense. And so the thing that sprang to mind for me, because so in this work, in going into prisons and into a prison and teaching people who were being held there, and teaching them about performance and theater, the majority of the students had never seen a play, or some of them not even ever been to a concert, or a few of them not even a live sports event, which are all types of live performances. So what was really fascinating and enjoyable was working with people to begin with their own awareness of their own bodies, to come to a place where there's a consciousness of like their spirit housed in their physical being, and then what the sort of inner conversation between the two is like, and allowing that to be conscious, to come out onto the surface, so that we began to build a pathway from the innermost places in our minds and our hearts to the expressive place where we can convey those things to other people. and they're not just rational things. They're not just thoughts that come out of the brain. They're not just concepts that are put into words and then delivered. They are impulses, like movements, and emotions, and the expression of emotions. And one of the funny things actually that we would sometimes discuss was I was always encouraging impulsivity and spontaneity. And oftentimes these students would quip that the being impulsive was the reason that they were incarcerated, because they had done something they knew was wrong, but they did it anyway. And we would laugh because I was encouraging them actually to relearn how to respond from an instinctive place or from a spontaneous place. But that is the very heart of play, as long as we're not hurting others, right? We don't want to, nobody should be crying when you're playing, unless they're tears of laughter.
Or doing cat's play like we do.
What is that?
Cat's play?
Well, I think that here's the problem with this one: cosplay.
You dress up
yes.
as characters. You pretend to be, just really immerse yourself. And if you're somebody who cries a lot, then maybe you're crying because you're
a crying character. Oh, this is wonderful. So I am not a mother myself, but I am in the life of a young woman who's in her early teens, and she is a furry. So I don't know if in the future, if you all are aware of this cultural phenomenon, it's a so-called subculture of our times. And and it's cat's play or cosplay. Yeah. So it's, wow. You hit it on the head there. Yeah.
That persists.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, it feels very new right now, but so, wow, wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that your actors are not hurting each other and crying.
We try not to.
Yeah. Good. There seems like there's a lot of hurting going on in 2020, and it seems weird to us. I don't, why? People, I mean, maybe it's that disconnection that between body and their mind and their spirit is not integrated. And then, because for us, it occurs, but it's very uncommon for someone to be so divided like that in their own selves. I mean, it doesn't. Your body's here, your spirit's here. Why aren't they?
Working together.
Yeah.
No, this is a wonderful point you're making, and also one of the other things that I find the most fascinating and inspiring about live performance and the creation of performative events is that they utilize the mind, body, and spirit to communicate and to share ideas. And there's so much information in those things that can't simply be delivered through writing or rational thought, which is, in our times in 2020, the glorification of the mind and of so-called rational thought is sort of the deity that everybody honors the most highly. I don't know in the future how you all consider or have resolved the term colonization, but that is a subject which is a hot topic in my times. And I when you spoke of the divisions between mind, body, and spirit, the thing, of course, that occurred to me is the way to conquer a people is to divide them. And so the way you conquer an individual also is you divide the mind, body, and spirit, so they can't communicate with each other. And then it is much easier for an authority to direct people to do what benefits the authority. So this is, of course, I'm sure you as historians are aware of this, that we're in a very strange time in 2020 when the majority of people willingly submit to living lives and behaving in ways that ultimately benefit somebody else and are detrimental to our own well-being. And for me personally, again, the practice of theater um, gives me not only an opportunity to free myself, at least sometimes, from this kind of virtual prison, if you will, but also to work with other people to gain a higher consciousness, in a sense, around these types of issues. And one of my theories is the reason why our government doesn't really support the arts and theater in particular through their budget, because that's the system we have, is that the government pays for things that benefit people, is because it's very revolutionary and it might actually change the system, which I don't think that those in authority really want.
That is a very interesting point, because we do discuss amongst ourselves frequently when we are researching your time. Why do people seem to willingly participate in this system? Why is it that they seem to willingly do things that are counter to their best interest? And it very much makes sense what you're saying about the division of the mind, body, and the spirit, and art being revolutionary. That it is a dangerous thing. It can be a dangerous thing. And in our research into other time periods, there are many examples of art being linked with revolutions.
I think once actors learn to project their smell and taste to the audience, I think maybe that's when they made the jump. But the theater is very important. The art is very important, I think, for manifesting the world that you see behind Cedar and myself, of a way that you can live.
I wonder if this technique you speak of is actually connected to traditional Indian theater, which they're in the training of performers in traditional Indian theater. I know very little about this, but what I do know is that there is a part of the training is about having the capacity to project an essence to the audience of emotions. But it's considered a physical act. It's not sort of imaginary. It's that the actor is actually somehow physically connecting to the audience and able to send an essence, a particular essence, to the audience. So that's fascinating that has, even though in the form that I've heard of it existing in today is like a traditional and old form, that has carried forward again. It's very fascinating. It's called a rasa, R-A-S-A, is in the Indian theater. Yeah.
Thank you. That will deepen and broaden our research.
It takes
all kinds.
That's
a little footnote for you.
All communities that
it really
have kind of come together in your future. There's a lot less division of who's who and what's what, but there's still a respect and understanding for where people have come from. I mean, it's hundreds of years, thousands of years past, but people have to know where they came from and be honest about what happened. And the way they do that is they tell the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you to people, thanks to people like yourself and others that you work with, that has helped to lay the groundwork for how we do it now. I may be hyperbolic to say this, but perhaps our actors would not be able to project their essences if people like yourself hadn't been doing the work to connect the mind, body, and spirit of people in the year 2020.
Yeah. Step by step. It's
step by step.
One thing after another, for certain. Well, that's encouraging. Yeah, those are definitely foundational things. In some ways, it seems like these processes go in cycles, because prior to screens being a part of our lives, right, the television, the movies, well, let's say the 20th century in general, movies and television becoming ways of storytelling, but very manipulable and manipulative ways of storytelling. prior to that, the focus was always on the famous actor was the one that made people feel a certain way. So I'm curious to see and to experience how in our current time, how we maintain the practice of connecting mind, body, and spirit while being able to utilize technologies in a helpful way to enlarge the art that we do.
Well, and before, sometimes the technology cuts us off, so I want to make sure to ask you this question before it happens. Zuzka, what do you hope for the future?
Wow, I hope I hope there is no more division and hatred. I mean, I truly hope for the empowerment of individuals, and I mean that in a very physically oriented way. That people know when they are present in their physical bodies that they actually hold power to sway others. And that empathy is included in that power. So an empowering that includes a shift in our cultural viewpoints that are towards the community and the whole. That and this pandemic is actually a wonderful opportunity for people to understand that our actions are not solely to save ourselves as individuals, but they're actually to protect our larger community and what that feels like. And how much better it feels than being isolated and divided and alone. Being with other people makes our serotonin and all those chemicals in our body that makes us feel pleasure, makes it heighten. So I really hope that as we move into the future, there will be a groundswell and a sea change of people getting on this sort of pleasure bandwagon of realizing that doing the things that promote life, that are biophilic, are very pleasureful. And even if the length of our lives might change, even if the quality of our life might shift, that we can move towards living a life that is more full of physical experience, emotional and physical experience. This is the thing that brought me to the theater, was a desire to be more physically present in my life. And so I hope to spread that to others through the work that I do.
Incidentally, the pleasure bandwagon is something that travels around the city that we live in, and there are instruments on it, and you just get on and you play music and enjoy yourself. And it
That's
moves.
great.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that's how you get from one place to the other. I mean, the vehicle wouldn't move if there wasn't music on it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's propelled with music. That's super. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for envisioning that.
Look forward to.
Yeah.
We're so glad to have you come and join us here in the future, that you as joining a part of this, what Rufus likes to call the future is now, Zoom communique, come from the year 2688. And we've had Zuska Sabata, who is a performing artist from the year that you all call 2020, explaining to us about her work and how we can see this bright future in this glorious utopia which we live in. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. A pleasure to speak with you and to learn something about the glorious future.
Well, hope we didn't do too much to break the time-space continuum. I guess we'll find out.
We'll find out.
I guess we'll find out. Okay, well, be safe.
Thank you.